Hello, I'm Ronald Day, Associate Vice President of the David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy, and welcome to Both Sides of the Bars, a discussion-driven show that examines the criminal justice system from various perspectives, including from those most impacted by the criminal justice system. We discuss critical questions about how the criminal justice system works, its intersection with social justice, and highlight the efforts that are being made to improve the lives of everyone that is affected by it. We ask you, the viewer, to spread the word about Both Sides of the Bars and share your comments with us on Twitter at The Fortune Society. So with me today on Both Sides of the Bars, I have some fantastic guests. Gabrielle Horowitz-Prisco is from the Correctional Association, and I'm going to briefly read your bio.
Sure.
So you're the Director of Juvenile Justice Project at the Correctional Association, a 170-year-old criminal justice nonprofit. Gabrielle leads the Correctional Association's efforts to make the justice system for youth safe, effective, transparent, and equitable. Gabrielle also coordinates the Juvenile Justice Coalition and Advocacy Collaborative. Gabrielle's recent TEDx talk on Canaries' love and justice explored the ways in which children serve as an early warning system for societal dysfunction and how criminalizing them endanger us all. And TED Talk makes you pretty famous, so thank you for being with us today. And also with us we have Ismail Nazario, who's a case manager at the Fortune Society and our ICANN program. ICANN stands for Individualized Correction Achievement Network, and where he helps those at high risk for recidivism from New York's Rikers Island reintegrate into society after their release. Ishmael is also a prison reform advocate, where he works to change the culture of American jails and prisons, where he works with young people who are frequently subjected to violence beyond imagination. And so raising the age of criminal responsibility is an issue that hits close to home for Ishmael. So of course today, that is exactly what we'll be talking about, raising the age of criminal responsibility in New York. And I'll just start by saying, so we're one of only 2 states that actually still charges young adults, 16 to 17 years old, as adults, and sometimes incarcerates them in adult prison system. So tell us about what exactly raise the age means so that our viewers understand this particular context.
Sure. Do you want to start? Or do you want me to start? All right. So as you said, Ronald, New York is one of only 2 states where the age of criminal responsibility is 16, and that's automatic. So sometimes people think like, oh, well, that's only for serious crimes, or a judge could send a case to family court. Okay. But in New York, it's 16. So if a child turns 16 and they're arrested for anything, no matter how minor, they're automatically prosecuted as adults. And they're treated the same as adults generally in the adult system. So if you're 16, you might as well be 46 in almost all ways. And also if a child who is 16 or 17 is locked up, they have to be sent to an adult jail or prison. Again, not even a judge can say, you know, oh, I'm worried about this kid in an adult prison, so I'm going to send her or him to the youth system. There's no exceptions.
No discretion.
No discretion.
Okay.
So 16 and 17-year-olds in New York get adult criminal records that stay with them for the rest of their lives. It bars them, many young people, from housing, from employment, from going to college, from loans, all of the things that are critical to successful reentry, which I know is, and you and the folks at Fortune work on, and you can probably speak to. And also young people in adult jails and prisons are at really grave risk of rape, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, of the possibility of solitary confinement in many facilities, which has done a lot of really important work around. And I think it's also important that viewers know that adult jails and prisons and the adult criminal justice system are just not meant for kids. And so they don't offer the kinds of rehabilitative services that are really the hallmark of the family court system. So our belief is that raising the age of criminal responsibility, it's not just our belief, it's actually science has proven, and the experience of other states has proven, that when kids are treated in the youth justice system, they actually recidivate less. It's better for society, it's better for public safety, in addition to being better for young people.
Got it. So why is raising the age of criminal responsibility important to you?
I think Gabrielle said it all, hit the nail right on the head. But it's important to me because I had like the firsthand experience of seeing the ins and outs of the inside of the system and being a young person in an adult jail.
Okay.
So I know what young people are subject to. I know the oppression that they have to endure on a day-to-day basis. There's this program that's been in existence on Rikers Island amongst young people, which pretty much you could say is like backed and allowed, so to speak, by the correctional officers. That is just, you know, it has to deal with extortion, young people oppressing other young people, and this is just more of a reason why people should really understand what takes place on the inside, so changes and voices can be heard on the outside, so more effective changes can be made on the inside for these young people. So raising the age of criminal responsibility I have so many reasons why this is important to me, and then not to mention, like Gabrielle put it, adult jails and facilities should not be a place where young people are put, because there's no innovative solutions for these young people while they're housed there in the meantime.
Yes.
That's it.
So Governor Cuomo has decided to take up the issue of raising the age in New York State. And right now, his team that he's assembled, the Senate and the Assembly are discussing this. And we know that a part of the reason is that science is on the side of raising the age.
Yes.
So the science says that a young person thinks like a child almost up until the age, of 25, I believe it is. And so their cognitive abilities are not that of an adult, right? Their decision-making capacity isn't that of an adult. So what do you say about that and us just getting to the point where we're seriously considering raising the age when the science has been out for quite some time?
Yeah.
What do you say, Gabrielle?
Well, I mean, I think it's an excellent point, Ronald. I'd say that you're right that the adolescent brain development research, which is the science you're talking about, shows that young people have difficulty making decisions, thinking through consequences. And I'll just, really keep it real simple. We often say, if anyone, viewers, if you've been a teenager, if you've raised a teenager, you know this intuitively. I sometimes talk about my own experience. I grew up in Staten Island, and I remember when I was about 16 or 17 in high school, I shoplifted from Macy's because the person I was dating was waiting for me in the parking lot, and there was a really long line. And I remember thinking, truly remember thinking, that it was Macy's fault that there was a long line. And if they didn't want me to shoplift, they shouldn't have such long lines. And, it's so hard for me to imagine now, right? I'm the kind of person that, like, if they give me an extra 5 cents, I go back to the store and go, here's my 5 cents, right? But I really remember at the time thinking, like, what's wrong with Macy's that they have such long lines? And, like, teenagers make bad, foolish decisions. And for some kids, particularly kids who look like me, who are white, who are middle class, upper class, who have educated parents who can advocate for them, who can advocate for themselves, right? If we get caught, there's a very different system of consequences.
Sure.
And so what really strikes me about this work is that when I worked in family court, I saw kids get arrested and prosecuted for the very same things I did. I sometimes talk about how I also did graffiti in high school, and then I became a defense attorney, and I would work in family court, and I literally defended kids, Latino boy who was 12 years old who was being prosecuted in the family court system, but for writing graffiti. And I think we have to really think about how for some kids we let kids we respond, we hold kids accountable. My punishment for doing graffiti in high school was I had to wash the walls. It wasn't that I was criminally prosecuted or prosecuted in family court. But the other research I want to talk about is the research around raising the age of criminal responsibility. So just a couple of statistics. There was a really strong study done comparing young people from New York and New Jersey. And they looked at kids. In New Jersey, the age is 18, and in New York, it's 16. So they compared, the researcher, who's a Columbia University researcher, really paired kids in like counties with similar characteristics, and he controlled for a ton of variables. So you were really looking at what is the effect of prosecution in the adult versus the youth system. Kids from New York were 100% more likely to reoffend with a violent offense. Wow. I'm going to repeat that. 100% more likely to reoffend with a violent offense.
That's
and
striking.
26% more likely to be reincarcerated. They were also arrested more frequently.
Yes.
And again, that's just New Jersey, right?
Exactly.
And additionally, Connecticut raised the age recently. They had been the third state along with us in North Carolina. And there's new research that's just coming out from a Dr. Kurlichek who studied the Connecticut change and found a 38% reduction in recidivism for 16-year-olds after Connecticut raised the age. So not only is there science about how the brain works, but there's also science that shows when kids are treated in the family court system, which has better rehabilitative options, which is less traumatic, where kids generally suffer less abuse, that actually, in addition to their own lives being better, they are less likely to recidivate. By shocking numbers, 100% more likely to reoffend with a violent offense in New York.
Yeah, and when you talk about less recidivism, you talk about increased public safety.
Exactly.
But let's talk about who is in the system. Let's talk about, because the data show that the young people that are impacted are mostly young men of color. And so you having been someone that was in the system, you know, what did you see?
Honestly, that's primarily all you see is young men of color. There's not really, I mean, I'll keep it focused on the city jail, Rikers Island, because upstate is completely different because we're talking about all over New York State. So they have different county jails in the states. But for Rikers Island, that's pretty much all you see is young men of color from all of the 5 boroughs. And a lot of, and the crazy thing, like Gabrielle was just speaking about with the recidivism rates, I remember in my time, I used to see young men that would come in, would be there for about a month until the next court date, get released from court, 2 weeks later they're coming right back. And this was a cycle I saw over a period of time, like a lot of the same faces in and out, back and forth. And you know, at the time, me being young myself, it kind of dawned upon me then, like, wow, this is something that needs to stop. Because it's like, you know, when you, I mean, it's sad to say, but it's like, when I used to see these young people leaving, they used to come back so quickly. I used to be like, so you went home for a vacation, and this is your actual home. And if you really think about that, that's just something that's just heartbreaking and to even have to, you know, leave your lips to say, but that's what we're seeing.
What were some of the primary reasons that young people are cycling in and out based upon your point?
A lot of it was possession of controlled substances, attempted sales, different small things like that that could, you know, you're here today, your next court date you get released because it's not that serious of an offense, but as they start to build up, now it becomes more serious and you start to look at more time.
But were young people receiving, and are they receiving the services that are adequately needed so the chances of them being involved in crime? Because we know a lot of young people who are in the system are dealing with trauma in their lives on a pretty regular basis. And we know that, you know, some of them could have, you know, some mental health challenges. We had that issue that just happened at the McDonald's that's been publicized, not just in New York, but all over the country. And people are saying, oh, why should we be raising the age when you have young people that are behaving this way? But I think there's an argument for that is exactly the reason why we should be raising the age. Do you agree, Gabrielle?
Yeah, I mean, again, I want to return to, you know, just that statistic I talked about before, but it's not just looking at New York and New Jersey. It's also looking at Connecticut. It's looking at Illinois. That other states, we are one of only 2 states that has not raised the age. And what the research shows us and what the tons of research shows is that there's less future violence and recidivism when children, if they are court involved at all, are in the youth system. And there's a lot of reasons for why, but one really important reason is that the youth justice system tends to offer kids services, so mental health services, you know, substance abuse services. It's not a perfect system, but it is a far cry from the adult system and from adult jails and prisons. Additionally, kids in the adult system, particularly in adult jails and prisons, experience tremendous, you know, risk, as I talked about before, of sexual assault, of violence, of also are an incredible suicide risk. Kids in adult jails are 36 times more likely to commit suicide than those in youth facilities. So when we think about what happens to kids in the adult system, we're perpetuating crime. And I do want to say, though, just so viewers understand that the governor's proposal wouldn't raise the age for all crimes.
Yes.
So there are some certain serious crimes that would remain in adult court. They'd be filed in adult court. So some, serious cases like the young woman in McDonald's might potentially,
End up in
remain in
adult
adult court. However, the governor's proposal also is making improvements to adult court for those kids whose cases remain in adult court. So for example, under the governor's legislation, there would be specially trained judges who are trained on working with young
Yes,
people.
yes.
There'd also be increased services for those kids who remain in adult court.
Yes.
And, I think I just really want to say that I'm always a little bit surprised when people say, well, we should keep kids in the adult system because they're doing bad things. Because again, the evidence and the experience of other states shows us that that just makes the problem worse. One national study that looked at 7 other studies and sort of summarized them all, it concludes by saying prosecuting children in the adult system is counterproductive to public safety and reducing crime and violence.
Yeah. So one question I have about that, we had a meeting, Fortune Society, with the governor's office recently, and we met with one of the senators. And so there's a question about whether or not the Senate is going to support this legislation. We know that the Assembly will more than likely do so. What do you think is going to happen as we get to the point where it's in the governor's budget, but there's a question about whether or not it's going to be watered down even more? And I think that's important to talk about, because if the research says that we should prosecute young adults, juveniles, in the juvenile justice system, then actually by watering it down, by saying, well, we should prosecute violent crimes in the adult court, that's not really keeping with the research either. So, I mean, we really believe that if they commit a crime, young people, they should be prosecuted in juvenile court, no matter if it's a violent offense. So there's always a push and a pull between, well, this person is charged with a violent offense. We know that sometimes these violent crimes are committed as a result of some of the issues that are happening in the community, some of the struggles that the young people have. So what do you say about even us, New York State, saying, well, we're going to still prosecute some individuals in adult court?
Well, the governor put together a commission called the Commission on Youth Public Safety and Justice, and it was co-chaired by our executive director, Sophia Elijah, and by Jeremy Creelan. And the members were a diverse set of stakeholders, including a number of members of law enforcement, multiple district attorneys, as well as advocates, as well as experts and stakeholders, a county executive from across the state. And the commission it was staffed by the Vera Institute of Justice, and spent a long time really looking at the research on the proposals and what other states have done. And the recommendations, which the governor's legislation are based on, really represent a set of proposals that, taken together, the commission felt are the best step for New York State. And it also represents a consensus between a diverse group of stakeholders. So I think that there are a lot of diverse opinions on this issue, and the commission issued a unanimous document and set of recommendations, which the governor accepted on Martin Luther King Jr. Day when he met with the commission and was presented with the recommendations. And so I think I would say that it's a really important, incredibly transformative step for New York, and it represents an important consensus between a really diverse group of stakeholders, and that all the pieces are interrelated. So while it may not be perfect, or there's pieces that different folks would like to see changed, when taken together, it would move New York from laggard to leader. We would go from one of the worst in the country to one of the best in the country.
I mean, we know things often happen incrementally. I mean, but this is a bold step for New York.
It is a bold
step to raise the age based upon the coalition that came together around these issues. So what about, though, the factor of still charging some young people as adults?
So the fact about that is the statistics are still gonna, I mean, the thing would have to be this: they would prosecute low offense crimes in family court. They wouldn't try them as adults anymore, but the violent crimes they would keep in adult court. But then also something would have to be done for these young people that's still being prosecuted in adult courts because, like you had mentioned earlier, you know, these young people have dealt with severe traumas in their lives, and you know all these different things and struggles that they've gone through is probably the main reasons why they do the things that they're doing. So they need to implement services for these young people that's going through the adult system because the ones that's being prosecuted through the family court system, they're going to receive these services. So the same should be done for the young people that's being prosecuted in the adult system. They should receive similar services, if not the exact same, or better services because it's a violent crime that they're being prosecuted for. So that's something that definitely needs to be looked into and should be in effect. It's not fair that, you know, a young person is accused of committing a violent crime, be sent to an adult jail, and while they're there, you know, education is limited, mental health services is limited, any rehabilitative services is extremely limited, and there's nothing therapeutic for these young people that's taking place to motivate them and get them to start thinking differently. So that's something that's major.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a society where we say we believe in second chances, and that should extend to someone who commits a violent crime as well, because those are the individuals who are going to serve the longest stint generally. And if the consequences are what you described, then that means that they're going to be far worse off than someone else would be. So I just think that at some point we need to get to that space where we're able to have those conversations as a society where we can talk about nonviolent versus violent.
I think you both make really excellent points, and I just want to say I do think the governor's legislation addresses some of those points. So for young people whose cases start in adult court, remain in adult court, again, there will be specially trained judges, but there also will be increased services. And so the legislation does have increased rehabilitative options, as well as those young people will not be in adult jails and prisons. So there's already currently, New York also prosecutes some young people as young as 13 in adult court, but those young people, if incarcerated, are in youth facilities until if they have longer sentences, they can be transferred once they reach adulthood. And the governor's legislation does something similar. So if it were passed, 16 and 17-year-olds, even if their cases are prosecuted in adult court, would not be placed in adult jails or prisons. Again, if they had a long sentence, they might spend the later part of that sentence, they would be transferred to an adult jail or prison. But I do think it's an important thing to really look at, and that we as a society have to really think about, and for all people, including adults, which is, what are the ways that we're responding when people break the law, and what are the kinds of services that we're offering? Because if we are concerned not only about individuals, which, of course, we're driven at the Correctional Association by a deep belief in the humanity of all people, as I know you guys are also at Fortune, but also public safety benefits when people who commit crime receive rehabilitative services and receive therapy and receive substance abuse treatment if they need it, or mental health services.
That's right. Yeah, and so what is the scope of the problem? I've read one statistic is that there are 50,000 young people, 16 or 17 years old, that are facing prosecution, and that several thousands end up in adult courts. Is that about right?
Well, the numbers have been dropping actually in New York, like all around the country. So currently, the arrests, I believe, in 2013 of 16 and 17-year-olds, the arrests as adults it was around 34,000 young people, and I believe that currently there's about 100 young people in adult prisons on any given day, and about 700 young people in county jails on any given day. And that's part of throughout the country and throughout New York, arrests have been dropping, crime has been generally dropping when you look at annual trends.
That's bigger than some states' criminal justice system, including adults. So, I mean, we're winding down on the show now, but so what is it that our viewers can do to support this piece of legislation so that New York can be no longer one of the states that continues to prosecute young people as adults? What is it that people can do?
Well, we would certainly love for people to visit the Correctional Association's website, where we have a petition that they can send to their legislators and to the leaders in Albany. So it's correctionalassociation.org, all one word, correctionalassociation.org. You can learn and get more resources about how you can get involved. We speak to schools, to churches, to community groups, but we only have a couple of weeks. The budget deadline is April 1st. So the most important thing people could do right now is visit our website, sign the petition, so they're sending information directly to their legislators, saying this is something I care about and we want you to raise the age.
And you've become a staunch advocate around raise the age, so what would you offer our viewers as well?
Pretty much kind of the same thing, and also just raising awareness in the communities and people just trying to get more involved and people actually wanting to care about this issue, because, something a lot of us would tell people is, what if it was your child going through this? I would hope so. We all have a heart, and we have to think about how we're treating our young people and what we're actually putting them through. If we want a better society and we really care about public safety and we care about our young people, which we normally say is our future, why not try to help this issue so it can be greater?
Yeah, I mean, we want young people to actually have the future that they could have despite their involvement in the criminal justice system. So thank you, Ishmael, for being on the show. Thank you, Gabriella, for being on the show, and continue the phenomenal work that you're doing around raising the age of criminal responsibility in New York. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So thank you all for joining us today on both sides of the bars, and thank you in TV land for your support. If you're interested in finding out more about the Fortune Society, please check us out on the web at fortunesociety.org or on Facebook by typing in the Fortune Society. This is Ronald Day as we critically look at both sides of the bars. Thank you.